Alright guys, so it is Friday evening. It's just about 5 p.m. I brought a few things out here that's going to be going on the two-door post that Randy gave me from Texas. If you haven't caught any of those videos, I had a subscriber named Randy that brought me a two-door post 55 body and a four-door post body for parts. So I'm taking two and making one, and I'm building the car into exterior only to look like a late 70s, early 80s car that you'd see on the street. It's going to have 5-slot mags, skinnies, 5-inch on the front, 15s, 15 by 5 on the front, 15 by 8 on the back. It's going to be raked up in the back a little bit. It's going to have a small block 350 flat top piston engine with ported heads, Edelbrock Performer RPM air gap intake, and 125 shot nitrous kit, which I bought 10 years ago for my 55, brand new from Summit, my hardtop. And I didn't put it on there because it jumbled up the engine compartment with a bunch of lines and wires and stuff. It's going to have some Fenderwell headers on it, and a 5-speed stick transmission. So should be a pretty neat little car for a little, cruiser that'll get down a little bit. Not nothing a bunch of heavy duty parts, but it'll be all right. But there's always room for improvement, we'll say. Anyway, this is some of the stuff that I have bought for the car. This is just budget stuff, and I'm all about budget. I don't have a lot of money. I can't open up a catalog and buy everything I need today. You know what I mean? It has to go in stages. So this is what I've been using my YouTube money for, which is not very much, but it helps. You know what I mean? So about 2.5 months ago, I think it was, I bought from eBay. This is a transmission crossmember kit and side engine mount kit with the mounts and hardware, and it was like $89 or something. It was cheap, man. It was around $100, we'll say, after it got shipped to my door. And the guy doesn't have any more of them. Now they're on there and they're like $130, $140 for this same setup. It's a different person though, so I don't have a link or anything. But at the time I got this, it was like $89. But now, probably not going to fit because the last couple of mounts I've encountered for 3/4 inch forward small block Chevy for a 55 Chevy, 6 or 7 Chevy, I've had to cut them up and make them work. They just didn't fit right. So hopefully these will work, but if they don't, I'll chop them up and make them work. Now the Crossmember I'm kind of impressed with. I don't know, I think these are powder coated stuff. May not be for that price, who knows, but they do look good. The Crossmember itself I'm pretty impressed with. It's kind of a nice piece. Whether it fits my 5-speed or not, I don't know yet. Hopefully it will. But these supposedly fit Tri-5 Chevy car. Now they send you these brackets here. These are raw, and you would weld these to the side of the frame rails for your Crossmember for the transmission. I'm not going to use these. I'm going to build my own out of something a little bit smaller, a little bit beefier. Anyway, these are 3/4 inch forward side engine mounts for small block for a 5, 6, or 7. These came with it, and hopefully these fit. Now they came with rubber engine mounts and a rubber transmission mount, but these are pretty light duty. These are kind of thin, so I'm going to swap them out for my wife's 55 4-door. I'm going to put these on her car because her car is just a 305 with the 308 gear, and it's just a cruiser. This 55 two-door post I'm building is going to have a little bit of pep in its step for what it is. I just don't trust these with a stick transmissions what it is, but if I'm grabbing gears, that's going to be a lot of strain on that little bitty thin mount. So anyway, I'm going to swap them out from these to my wife's car and use the energy suspension stuff on the two-door post. And the transmission crossmember mount, or the rubber mount for the trannies, the same way. It's kind of thin. I don't have a lot of faith in it, but looks like some of the hardware, just looking in here on the head, this is metric hardware, so I'm not going to be using any of that garbage. I do have a couple of bolts here from Lowe's. These are standard thread grade 8 for the engine mounts themselves, and I've got enough extra hardware grade 8 standard stuff. I'm pretty sure I'll have the stuff for the engine mounts to the block and crossmember and all that. But that is the engine and transmission crossmember kit for $89 that I bought about 2.5 months ago. I'm pretty happy with the quality on the look of it for what you get. You know what I mean? But most likely I'm gonna have to modify this stuff. Who knows? I don't even know if the crossmember's wide enough or not. I haven't even tried it. Anyway, this is something I just got like a week ago. This is an energy suspension urethane body mount set for Tri-5 Chevy. So it'll have urethane energy suspension body mount set on it. And then, now I bought this off of eBay, and the only reason I bought this like a month ago. This was like $18, and this is a aluminum filter, and it's almost identical to my Holley Pro Series that I have on my hardtop, which is black. I mean, it's not. I think mine's a little bit beefier, but I was pretty impressed with it for what you get. Now, this is only, I think it's 40 micron, but it'll be all right. I've run something like that before, and I'll explain why. But anyway, this is a fuel filter, it's a billet fuel filter, and it comes with 3 different size AN fittings. But anyway, I think what I'm running is -6, I think. Anyway, I got these fittings. These are compression fittings with AN on this end, but compression fitting on this end for aluminum fuel line. So this, I've already got one on there, as you can see. I'm going with the old school red and blue AN fitting stuff because it's going to be an old school style build. But anyway, this is only a 40 micron filter, and it's not really what you're supposed to use, but I'm going to use it anyway. And the reason is because my first 55 I built, I did the same thing, and it worked fine for me. In case you don't know, you're supposed to have like 100 micron before your fuel pump, and then you're supposed to have like a 40 micron after the fuel pump to your carburetor. So now originally 55s, they just had a little sock filter in the tank, and then they had a filter you know, up there at the you know, in front of the carburetor, the old glass top fuel filter. That's all they had. So on my first 55, I had a little cheapy filter, you know, in front of the electric fuel pump back there by the tank, and I'm going to do the same thing on this car. I am putting a Carter electric fuel pump on the two-door post 55 and this filter, but it's only 40 micron. But I've got the sock in the factory sending unit. I'm going to be using that, and then this in front of it, and then the electric fuel pump. And again, it's not recommended for that, but I've run it before like that, and I never had any problems because the tank's going to be brand new anyway. So anyway, if you don't like it, I don't care. That's the way I'm going to do it. Now, I'm not going to be running, I'm not going to put this pump, the Carter fuel pump, and I'm not putting this fuel filter on the 55 right now. This is something I can go in and splice in later after, you know, I go back to restore the car. Right now, I'm just going to be doing a fuel line. Okay, so this is a universal roll of aluminum fuel line, 3/8 that I get at Summit, and I have run this stuff on dozens of my cars I built. I have never had a problem out of this. I had somebody on a forum one time telling me that running the unleaded fuel with the ethanol in it will just eat the inside of this line away. That's a load of crap, because I have never had any issues. But anyway, that's what I got for this car, and then I got a couple of packages of the Summit 3/8 fuel line clamps here. It's just a universal clamp, but it's a 2-piece billet, which I like, and I just drill the frame and tap it for those to go on there. But anyway, this weekend I'm going to work on the chassis for the two-door post, and that's going to be one of the deals. After I get the engine and trans mocked up in the frame, I'm then going to set up the fuel line and get it pre-done and the holes drilled for these and everything and tapped for the fuel line. But that's the plan. So the reason I decided to go ahead and do the chassis this week is because doing the chassis will allow me to get it out, what's left of the four-door that Randy gave me, out of the fenced area, and I can go ahead and get the body, what's left of the rear section of the body, cut up and out of the way. And I can actually, when I'm done this weekend, I can roll that four-door frame around back. The two-door post body and the four-door post body of my wife's is going to go in my fenced area, and then I can mow and weed eat the whole yard and everything. So when my wife comes home from her mom's this weekend, it should look really nice, and she should be happy that there's no derelict bodies in the yard. Hopefully. It's about 7:30 p.m. on Friday, and I pushed my wife's four-door and the two-door post over here in the yard. I kind of got everything out here in the yard temporarily. So I got my rider fired up, and I kind of mowed that. I need to weed eat. So I pulled the four-door, what's left of it that Randy gave me for parts. I pulled it out, It actually had a tire that the tread had popped on. I heard it pop the other day. Basically the tire blew out from the sun being on it, I guess. So anyway, I had to put one of Steve's old wheels on there, which he said I could borrow for a while as long as I needed them. Thank goodness it was here, so I had a roller anyway. But I rolled it around here and got it up on the concrete pad here, the driveway. And I got the 350 turbo mockup trans unbolted from the small block mockup engine. And I dug out the 5-speed out of the 56. It was laying in the back floorboard of it. So now I need to get it around here. I can't find my dolly. I've got a 2-wheel dolly and I can't find it. It may be in my shed. I'm gonna have to go look. But anyway, I got to get that transmission over here and bolt it up to the back of that and get ready to set that down in there. I kind of messed with this Crossmember, and I'm kind of impressed. This is the $89 Crossmember, and it's actually going to fit between the frame rails, so that's kind of cool. That's kind of impressive. But when you shove it all the way over against the frame rail, I don't know, there's about a, I don't know, what is it, ½ inch or so, which is fine. I'll make the pads stick out further. But I kind of wish those mount pads on the end were 180 degrees, upside down basically. But I'll make this work. It should work just fine. Yeah, that'll work out pretty good, man. So I had used a plasma cutter when I had this 4-door up here before, when I was taking it all loose, and I kind of crudely chopped the factory mounts off. I'll have to go in and dissect these real good. It's not that bad to do, you just got to pay attention, but you can get that off there and it'll look like there was never anything on there. So it's got that old rough factory welds on it. But Boy, they really got that bent up good. Because this frame's not bent anywhere up here. This is a nice stock straight chassis. I should have known, you know what I mean? Man, that sucks. So what I mean is I got this flush right here. That's how much space is off the top of that frame up there. Nice job, guys. Nice job building parts. Nobody makes anything correct. I completely hand built the ones on my hardtop. They're all from scratch. And the engine mount bolts, when I go to pull the engine mount bolts come right out like butter. So these, by the time they're tightened up, holes drilled in the frame and all 4 bolts and nuts put on, it's going to bend those to contour the frame, and the motor mount bolts probably won't go in right. So, oh man, I'm telling you. But it doesn't surprise me. That's a good 1/4 inch high off the top of that frame. That is terrible. Let's see what these feel like. Same thing. Good quality parts, man. So probably I might just cut this tab off, go ahead and bolt this rear on, and just stitch this. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is clean the bosses in the block, 3/8 by 16. Well, that ought to work. All right, guys, it is Saturday morning. It's a little bit late. I slept in a little bit. I'm pretty sore from climbing in and out from under Steve's car, working on that shifter so much yesterday, and then pushing cars and doing all this crap. So I got my back pretty fired up, but I'm going to go ahead and try to work a little bit. So before I quit last night, I pushed all this stuff kind of up here in a cluster. I set the engine down after I bolted the 5-speed to it. So I've talked about this before. This is a mock-up block, but I'm putting a 350 in the car. But this is a 2001, I think, 5-speed, hydraulic 5-speed from a 4.3 liter V6 S10, which the 4.3 V6s have the same bell housing pattern, so it does bolt on. But I got this from a buddy of mine for like 20 bucks, and he said it was a good used transmission. So I'm going to try it. Now this obviously is going to be a light duty rig. This is not something you want to put slicks on, tape to the drag strip, rev it up, dump the clutch, do all that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of building something that, you know, it'll look cool, cruise it around, have some fun with it. And if I ever break it, I'll try to find something better, like maybe something out of a 5-speed or something. And, you know, I don't know. But this is what I have for budget. This is what I'm going to use right now. There's always room for improvement on swapping out parts. But I set it up last night, just kind of temporary to leave it. I don't have any tension on my engine hoist. It's the hook's not even hooked on the chain. Now what I'm doing something a little odd here. I'm gonna try this. So these are Steve's original front mounts from his car, because I converted it to side engine mounts. And I had the same issue with his. The ones he bought, they didn't fit. I had to cut them up and make them work. So I put these stock engine mounts on, but what I did was I removed the washers off the bottom. Now these are pretty unique. They got a shoulder on them, and they're designed, this is the 6-cylinder mounts here, the V8s at the back, but they're designed to fit down in that hole in that frame to set flat. So anyway, then your bolt goes down in there kind of like this, and you have a little bit of wiggle room. But when you put the cushion on there, and this supports the cushion, that's kind of what centers it in there. So with that bolt kind of centered, there's a lot of room in here. Now when you take the washer out, there's even more room. So what I did was I replaced the washer on the bottom, and I actually put 2 old cushions that I had that were a little bit thinner because I'm trying to get that engine down just a little bit. Because that 5-speed, you can see how tall it is. Most likely I'm going to have to cut the trans tunnel out and build a new one anyway. I've got to build all new floors anyway. But anyway, these cars do have a little room for the engine to go down. Now these are urethane, I think. Not these, but these are. So what I did was I put a regular flat washer on here, and then I shoved the engine as far forward as it will go. So pretty much the stud is touching the front part of the frame right here like that. So I gained, I don't know, a little bit of room, we'll say. So I set the engine and trans in like that. Then I went through and I took a rubber mallet and I hit on this to make sure it was as far forward in the hole as I can so it's touching. Then I took a Sharpie and went around it, and then just for measure I used a sharp 90-degree pick and kind of scribed around it. But I have the engine a little bit forward further than stock. So, this engine and a turbo 350 mock-up transmission had been sitting in my wife's car for almost a year outside with a cover on it. And apparently it got rain in it. But this is a 305 HO from a Monte Carlo SS, and it had 89,000 original miles. It just needed a re-ring job and a cleanup, basically. But I decided to go ahead and pull the cylinder head off to check out the cylinder walls, because the cylinder heads are pretty rusty. I had them in bare metal. I actually sprayed them light with the WD-40 all over. But apparently that, you know, after a year it just doesn't quite last as long. But anyway, the cylinder walls, after I got the cylinder head off, these were really, really rusty. I went ahead and grabbed a ball bead hone, a wore out one, and I went in there and attacked it pretty good. I didn't get it perfect, but I cleaned it out pretty good. And then I put a rubber glove on, and then I put some wheel bearing grease on the cylinder walls. And that's just to, you know, help protect it a little bit till I don't really have any plans for this engine. It's just, you know, in the future I may have to put it in something, so I didn't want to ruin it. But if it is ruined, it's not that big of a deal because it is a 305, but it kind of sucks. Anyway, I used my cut brush on the face of the block and on the bottom of the cylinder head. But what I had done, which I'm glad I caught it, I'd only put one cylinder bolt head in the block for each side, and I was actually using, you know, bolts with a chain on it to the cylinder heads to lift the engine up and out of there. And I got to noticing that. I was like, I better put a few more bolts in that. So I got a tap and I went through and cleaned I didn't clean all the head bolts. I just cleaned the one in the center and 2 on the outside on each end. So anyway, I'm basically cleaning up the threads on the wire wheel with these old used head bolts and putting a little WD-40 on them before I put them down in there. But anyway, I'm going to put a few more bolts in the cylinder head to hold it flat to the block if I'm going to be lifting it up and out of there, you know what I mean? Hopefully I didn't distort them heads too bad lifting that, but it didn't have the crank and rods and all that stuff in it, so hopefully there wasn't enough weight there to hurt anything. That's my bad for being dumb, I guess. So I took a measurement from dead middle of the big hole, the factory hole, to up here, 3/4 of an inch, and I went ahead and marked it, and then I went in and I drilled a hole, and then I used a step bit until it opened up, you know, this part here opened up. Then I went through with a die grinder and slotted it. So anyway, when that stem, motor mount stem, goes up all the way, the stud, that's my 3/4 of an inch for factory location, or factory mount, but it's going to be 3/4 forward. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I got to get the engine and trans up a little higher, but I'm going to go ahead and jack up the chassis, get it on jack stands, get it all leveled, zeroed out on bubble levels. And then I'm going to set the engine mounts back in, lower this down on it. I got to get the trans mount put on the trans, put the cross member on it, and then try to get it set up to where I got 3 degrees down at the tail shaft with 0 on the carb path. Here we go. I want to show the difference between a energy suspension urethane transmission mount to like a stock replacement, you know, like something you'd get at the parts store or whatever. Definitely eBay, because that's where this came from with this kit. So the first thing I wanted to do was remove the transmission mount from the Turbo 350 for my wife's car to put it on this car, because this is heavier duty than these light duty things. My wife's car is going to be a cruiser, so I'm going to use this light duty stuff on her car. But with this 2-door post, going to have a little bit more power than her car, and especially a stick transmission for, you know, the shock of changing gears or whatever. I wanted to have something beefier, so that's what I want to do, is use these instead of turning around and spending another $130, $150 on another set. However, I may end up having to buy another set of these to put in my wife's car, because the difference in height and everything on these. So what I was going to do was put this light duty stuff on my wife's 4-door and just take the stuff off the 4-door and put it on this car. But with this stuff, that is a mega difference in height right there. Get the camera down as low as I can. But now this will crush a little bit, but that's a mega difference in height. So I've already set up the, you know, the transmission and the crossmember and everything in her car for 3 degrees down. So I'm going to have to end up buying another set of these, which is fine. But it was, you know, at least I tried. So just in case you guys, you know, have something like this on your car now and you decide later, hey, I might upgrade to these, keep in mind that that's going to change the transmission height in your crossmember. So this is thicker basically. Now I don't know relative to the engine mounts yet if there's a difference. I'll check those here in a second. So I've got a couple of bolts out here and washers. This is just temporary. I'll put lock washers on it at the final, but for now, for mock-up, I'm just using these. But I wanted to make sure that the holes that are already in this cheapy crossmember actually line up with the mount, and they do. So dodged a bullet there. That's pretty cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and install this on the transmission. Now I want to tell you guys this so you know, when you buy a transmission mount, energy suspension mount, it comes with this plate here. This is not an optional piece or a spacer plate. This is a necessity. This is what keeps this in place. So you have to have that on there per instructions. That's not a spacer. That is actually a needed part on there. So keep that in mind. You have to have that. And same thing with the engine mounts. So the energy suspension engine mounts I've already got on the engine. And I mean, you can see by the thickness of that compared to these light duty ones. Look at the difference in the thickness of the metal right there. These are paper thin. So any kind of performance car at all, I would not run these. I would get these. So the engine mounts for energy suspension are the same as the trans mount. It has a plate on the back side. That's not optional. That has to be on there per instructions. So be sure you put both of those on there. So what I need to do is basically check and see if the depth and all that is the same. But most likely I'm going to have to end up buying another set. Yeah, these are, you can tell in the height right there. If I hold that level, yeah, I'm gonna have to, because these are different locations, so for everything to line up in my wife's car, I'm gonna have to get another set, which is fine. It's something I can do later. But all right, these were a fail, which having the energy suspension on my wife's car too is just, it's just gonna make it better anyway, a little bit more durable. So that kind of sucks. I got to spend 130 or 150 bucks on the set, but oh well. I got the engine mounts, top and bottom. The nuts are tight, you know, underneath the frame, and then on top up here. So those are tightened down. Before I tightened them, after I let the weight of the engine hoist off of the engine, I used my dead blow there and hit the mounts on the back to make sure they were as far forward as they were going, which it's up there with my Sharpie mark. So those engine mounts are now more forward than they were. So that's pretty cool. I went ahead and bolted the cross member. I bolted the urethane mount to the transmission, then I bolted the cross member to the mount and tightened it all down. Then I put the jack on the bottom of the cross member. Now what that's going to do is all this will be weighted. Instead of using just the jack on the transmission and trying to set it up and then put the cross member in and all that, and then, you know, weld everything up, and then when you tighten it down, the transmission might tighten down a little bit. So this way all the weight is on it. So wherever I set that with the floor jack, it will be perfect to build my brackets off of. So I'm not real happy with this mount at this point, which it's probably going to be fine after, you know, I do it. But you can see with it tightened down and where I've got the jack on it, it's got it kind of angled. I wish these mounts were the other way. So I think that's kind of silly that they're like that, but I'll try to make it work. So right now, all of the weight of the engine and trans is in the car. The mounts on the front, the engine is, you know, basically setting on those. And then all of the transmission weight at the rear is on the floor jack. So I will have to adjust this. So what I've done is I've set my intake manifold on here, and I've got a angle finder, one on each side because I have two of them. And it's just for, you know, whatever side of the car I'm on, I can actually see. So that's why I put two up there. But I'm not quite zero. This carb pad has to be 0. When that carb pad is 0 level with the chassis, that automatically puts the transmission at 3 degrees down, which is correct for your angle of your drive shaft stuff. So from the looks of it, I need to jack it up just a little bit to get it on 0. So try to give it a pump here. Probably not going to take much, I would imagine. Yeah, it's going to take a little more than that. I mean, I can already see the height difference on these transmissions. These 5-speeds are so thick. So it's a good thing I'm doing a custom floor, because I'm sure the factory trans tunnel is not going to clear that. It might, but I doubt it. All right, so looks like I need to go a little bit more again. Boy, it already didn't seem right. It's still not quite 0. Yeah, that one's not quite setting flat, is it? These are just cheapy ones. Yeah, it does need to go up some more. Good golly, that cross member I don't think is going to work, guys. It's already above the frame. I mean, it might, but I'd be surprised if it did. So I thought that was going to be a pretty good buy, because you were getting a decent done cross member for $89, but that is not the case. I just can't quite get that where I need it, so I'm gonna like overdo it and see what happens. This is getting kind of irritating, actually. Now I have my glasses on, but I'd say that's pretty good. And I got kind of aggressive with it. Yeah, look how high that transmission's out of there. That does not look right at all. Wow. All right, that crossmember's not gonna work. It's gonna have to be cut up and modified, just like everything else with the whole kit. In other words, don't buy that kit. It's garbage. Yeah, that ain't gonna work at all. I don't know how they expect you to make that work. I mean, and probably not for a 5-speed. It may work for a turbo 350 or 400 or 700 or something, but it's not gonna work for that. The only thing I can think of is change that pad somehow. I might have to put some spacers on that transmission. I think that's what I might do. I might put some spacers in between the mount and the transmission to get that cross member to come down. I'd like to use it because it's here, and it'd be easier to use it that's already here than it would be for me to custom build a whole new one. And it really sucks. But the chassis is level and that carb pad's 0, so I know that's pretty much where it needs to be. This is the intake I will be using. This is an RPM air gap intake manifold. The air gap means that the carb pad is separated from the intake itself. So these are pretty good for like low to mid, and they may go up. I don't remember what the RPM range is on this actually. But I bought this brand new from Summit for my hardtop, and I had started decasting the intake. I was going to smooth the whole intake and then paint it the orange. And then I ended up wanting the oil fill tube in the front, and this doesn't have space for it, so I used a RPM instead of the air gap, so it just went on the shelf. But I never did end up going over here and grinding all this off. You can see the bosses for the nitrous fogger nozzles or whatever. That's what I removed on the other side, was those, and tried to clean it up. But so now that I'm going to use it on this car, I need to go ahead and try to remove these and smooth up just this part here and call it a day. But what I think is interesting about these intakes in particular is if you have a 55 Chevy that has the factory temperature gauge that's a capillary tube, because in 56 they changed to electric. But if you have the capillary tube for your 55, the temperature sender, the end of it, it's not long enough to reach out here to the front of the intake, but it will reach right here. And this air gap has a port back here, and a lot of intakes do not. Not a lot of aftermarket ones do not. So, I mean, from the factory, these are, you know, they send you enough plugs to plug everything, but I'm going to be plugging that one. But I have the adapter to go in here for that temp probe to go in there, so my factory temperature gauge capillary tube will work, and I think that's pretty cool. So, all right, so I've got some spacers here that probably came in some kind of lift kit from the shop I used to work at. Anyway, I think these will work pretty good. It's about the right size hole for the bolt for the transmission. So what I think I'm going to do is put these in place of I'm going to take the mount off of the transmission, and I'll have to get longer bolts. But I am going to put those in between the mount and the transmission itself with a longer bolt. It's a pretty good, I guess a pretty good scab for that. These are that heavy-duty plastic stuff. I don't know what you'd call that. I don't know if these are nylon or some kind of poly or something, but I have seen like body lift kits that have this same plastic. Because I used to work at a shop when we did a lot of lift kits and stuff like that. And anyway, there was a whole bunch of extra stuff in buckets, and some of the stuff I brought home to have for using it for stuff like this when I run into it. But I think that's what I'm going to use. I don't think these will ever break. These are pretty stout. But if they do, I'll just make something else that's about the same thickness and call it a day. But for now, I think that'll work. I think it'll actually work from now on. But I'm probably going to have to go across the street to Tractor Supply and get 2 metric bolts. So now I've got to remove all this stuff again and swap it out. I got the cross member put in, kind of. So I made my little L brackets for the end by cutting them out of that square tubing. Now I'm going to build gussets on the side, and they'll be welded up and ground and look nice. So it'll have a gusset from here to the bottom of that, and this whole outside will be welded. So anyway, they'll be like triangled off on both sides. But for now, I was kind of set everything up and see how it looks. So I've got my bolts tightened up here. I want to get bolts that are 1/4 inch longer so I have a little bit of thread hanging out. I mean, these do go all the way through the nut. It just ain't long enough for me. But this is all I have here. I'll have to get some at Tractor Supply. Luckily I can get that grade 8 hardware by the pound, because I need some for my bell housing anyway. The ones I have, some of them are too short and some of them are too long, but they work for mockup. So what I did was I just basically self-drilled these brackets in, and I took a measurement off a hole in the frame on both sides to get it exact, and then measured it up and across, and that was the bottom of it. But I'm happy with it, man. It's I don't like that I had to put spacers on there, but it's kind of all I had to do to be able to use this cross member, and this will be just fine. I don't think it'll ever have any problems. But anyway, if they use rubber for and urethane for a mount, I mean, why wouldn't that poly plastic, whatever that crap is? That's that stout plastic stuff that they use for body mount bushings and, you know, for lift kits and stuff. But anyway, I'm happy with it. I got it. It's tightened to the trans mount. This is bolted down tight. Other than the self drillers in the frame, I'm going to perimeter weld this whole thing after I gusset it and grind it smooth and clean it up, and then I'll put those brackets on, and then I'll perimeter weld it. I'll pull the self drillers out and fill that full of weld, so it'll be plug welded. But I'm probably going to drill a hole 1 or 2 sizes bigger in the mount, and then that way it'll be a smaller hole in the frame, so when I go to plug weld it, it'll fill up both, you know what I mean, weld up both. But I'm happy, man. That is put in exactly where it needs to be, and the carburetor pad is on 0. How cool is that? So it is basically setting in the chassis that I've leveled here, and I've got it pretty good. What I ended up doing, I kept using this floor jack for this transmission, and I finally went out under the hood of my pickup and got my square body jack here and put it underneath the transmission, and that allowed me to fine tune it, adjust it to zero out that. So that ended up working out pretty good. But it's taken all day to just basically get the engine and trans set in there. Other than I went through and cleaned up the block a little bit. You know, cleaned the threads and the holes for the head bolts and stuff, because the blocker got rained in. But I think the next order of business is going to be to go ahead and start fabbing up the side engine mounts. I need to finish these frame brackets and get them welded, but you know, it's going to be all right like it is right now, just to hold this stuff right now. So that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to go ahead and build the side engine mounts and get that going. Well, I decided to go ahead and stick the headers on here just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like. This is my first time of me personally putting Fenderwell headers on something. I've had these headers for a long time in my attic, but for a past project, but this is the first time I've actually bolted them on. But it's sure gives them a crazy look, you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's what we're looking at there, Fenderwell headers. But that ought to be pretty neat. I got to tell you, these are raw. It was cheaper to get them raw. Remember, that's why I bought them raw. But anyway, these are going to end up just getting cleaned up and prepped out, and I'm just going to paint them with the VHT header paint in white, because white headers is kind of what everybody did back in the 70s. So that's what I'm going to do on this deal. And I'm not sending them off to some coater to have them coated. I don't have the money to do that, but I can afford to go get a few cans of white VHT paint, you know what I mean? So those are going to be white just because that's the way it was. But what I am planning on doing, and this is why I'm kind of blending old with new, this is kind of my theory. I don't want side pipes on the car. I want mufflers. I just don't want to put side pipes on the car. I'm not a side pipe guy. Those are for Corvettes and Cobras, you know what I mean? They're not for 55 Chevys, in my opinion. So they're not going to be in the look I'm going for, I'll say. So here's what I'm gonna try to do, and this is all, I've just got to get in there and start cutting and try to figure it out. What I had always envisioned is I'm gonna take a piece of pretty big size pipe that's heavy walled. It's in my backyard. I don't remember what size it is. It's definitely big enough for exhaust to clear it. But I'm going to take that piece of round pipe and I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to cut the bottom of the frame out right about here at an angle. So like I'll make a cut at an angle here, and I'll cut at an angle here. And then I'll cut it out into a half circle on both sides, but it's going to be angled. And then I'll lay that pipe in there and I'm going to fully weld it. And that's in an effort to try to get some of the strength of the frame back. Now I'll probably end up putting some outer plates on it, like fish plate style, just for the added safety, since this is on the curve of the chassis, you know what I mean? I don't want to lose any strength or anything. But anyway, I want that pipe to come up here kind of about like this at an angle. So that way I can take a 90 out here and go down through the chassis at an angle, and then kick over into exhaust and put my mufflers up here inside the frame like I normally do. That way I don't have exhaust down the side and all that kind of crap. Now the other thing I'm kind of wanting to do, and I may have to, you know, cut this down, and I've got a pair of these deals here, but I may end up welding a new one up here higher or extend it, just whatever I got to do. But I'm going to do a piece off the side. I'm going to hole saw it and then put a piece of muffler pipe up there flush and weld it. But it'll have a side exit through the fender. And I'm going to put electric cutouts on here. So when I flip a switch in the dash, it'll go open header and come out the side of the fender. And then that way I'll have my Fenderwell, you know, open header sound. But anyway, I can close it and have my full exhaust system. It's just an idea. It's just what I'm thinking about doing, in case you don't quite follow what I'm talking about. Some of the, you know, fast street cars, the guys are doing that. Now that's not a fast street car, I just like the look of it. But it's going to be like there'll be a hole in the fender like right in here, and I'll do a stainless piece of sheet metal out around it and, you know, drill holes in it and have like some button head stainless Allens polished up in there to bolt on for a heat shield. But anyway, the exhaust will stick out just a little bit. But that'll be, when I flip the switch in the dash, will be open header coming out of here. So I'll probably have a little bit of fire coming out of there when I rev it up and stuff, but it'll be kind of cool. But I do want full exhaust on the car to go, you know, kick under and go in between the frame rails. That way, when you're looking at the car from the side, you don't see no side pipes on it. And I think that's generally what people do with a Fenderwell header on Tri-5s, is they just do a side pipe, and I really don't want that. I don't want them little shorty glass pack looking header mufflers or anything like that. I want a full turbo muffler on there, so it's, you know, not completely obnoxious. I actually might go with an old school 2-chamber Flowmasters, because back in the early 90s I put Flowmasters on everything. Of course, it was popular back then, you know. They had those kick-ass posters with the cars doing wheelies and stuff, and you could see the Flowmasters. So I may do the Flowmasters, because I always love the sound of a cammed up small block with Flowmasters. And again, you know, the Flowmasters are more of a 90s thing, and I'm building a 70s car, but that's why I said I'm kind of all over the place with this build. But it's kind of a blend of old and new, but it's stuff that I like, and that's, you know, when everybody builds a car, everybody's different. So I think it'll be pretty neat. But I'm pretty happy with them headers, man. That's not too bad looking set of headers. I do like that they put a little tag on there, Patriot Exhaust Products. It's pretty cool. But that's a pretty big tube. I think those are bigger than what's on my hardtop. So it ought to sound pretty mean anyway. Well, I got to do a closeout video here. It's just about dark, and I've already cleaned up all the stuff. All I'm going to tonight anyway. So it's the end of Saturday night, and I didn't get as far as I wanted, which never is the case. But I'm using, you know, stock engine mounts for now. This is just to locate it. Locate the engine in the chassis, so I know this is right. But those are going to be coming off. I won't be reusing those. I've just basically used those after I notched the frame further to get the engine forward to make these side engine mounts work. So I cut the tubing off the top of these mounts, and they're not going to work. I'm going to have to end up building new ones. So I was hoping I could make them work, but There's just too big of a gap. I mean, they're garbage, man. They're all twisted up and stuff. I don't know what they make these on. I think they just make them in their backyard off of wood or something. I don't know. I could build them better in my driveway than that. So tomorrow's project will be to try to get those at least started, or I hope I can finish building those tomorrow, but at least the Crossmember's partially done, and then get this all finalized. But it just sucks, man. I never can get as far as I want, but that is enough for tonight. Thanks for watching.